Show me the crypto. Show me the crypto. Show me the crypto.
In a world on the brink of disruption, two men will bring you clarity by interviewing some of the most intelligent and influential names in the blockchain world. Welcome to Show Me the Crypto with your hosts, Wade Patterson and Ulf Lonergan.
Well, hi there, and welcome to Show Me the Crypto. My name is Wade Patterson.
And I'm Ulf Lonergan.
We're a couple of friends who love learning about cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology, and we're happy you're along for the ride. Whether you're a crypto virgin or you know your way around the block, we hope our interviews with some of the most intelligent and influential people in the space help deliver you with value. And on this episode, we're joined by Travis Uhrig, co-founder of Curio Cards, which is the oldest known crypto NFT art project on Ethereum. Launching on May 9th, 2017, well before NFT was a household acronym, the goal of the project was to use Ethereum to create a new model for digital artwork ownership. The collection features 30 unique NFT cards from 7 different artists. Aside from being co-founder of Curio Cards, Travis is a software engineer who is a fan of cats, cooking, and Trello. Travis, welcome to Show Me the Crypto.
Thank you. Glad to be on.
Yeah, we're excited to have you on. And before we jump into all things Curio Cards, you've clearly been in the space for a long time. So do you mind letting our audience know how you first discovered crypto and what your initial impressions were?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually first discovered crypto the way that crypto was intended to be. It was given to me as a form of payment. The holy grail, like we're actually use this thing for money, we'd say back in the day, and no one used it for money. But I was doing consulting, just like tech support and setting up Active Directory, just kind of boring stuff. And I forget exactly what the job was. It was some kind of remote server administration thing. And the guy said, I can pay you in Bitcoin. And I'm like, sure. I didn't really know what it was, but I had heard of it. But I had also heard of this thing called eGold, which was some dude in Florida, I think, had a bunch of gold in the vault and issued a token for it. It was not decentralized. It was not, internet money, right? It was just some guy doing a thing. I even think it was shut down pretty aggressively at one point. Legal action was involved. But it was like $60 or something. He sent me the Bitcoin, and I'm like, cool. Let me go ahead and turn this into real money. At the time, Mt. Gox was still around, but actually I didn't go on Mt. Gox. It just seemed like too much of a hassle for such a small amount of money. You had to hook up your bank account. There wasn't a nice easy payment integration. You had to do wire funds to Japan. It was nuts. So I actually went on Second Life because you could trade Bitcoin for Linden dollars.
That's crazy.
There was this market for it. And again, I still don't know what Bitcoin is at this point, but I got my Linden dollars. I think that violates the Linden dollars terms of service, but I don't think it's illegal. I think I turned them into ISK, which is EVE Online's currency at the time. Yeah, I don't remember the details. So then I promptly forgot about it for quite a while after that. And for the longest time, somebody asked me when's the first time you got involved in Bitcoin. I completely would forget this story, but I was reminded of it later when it was the first one that I was a part of, the first kind of big price run. There'd obviously been big price runs when it went from $1 to $30, and that was huge. But I was a part of the run when it went up to 1,000 the first time. I think that was very late 2013, beginning 2014. I know the date because at the top, Mt. Gox got hacked, and they said, "Yeah, we're insolvent," and then it dropped right back down and stayed down for 2 years. They killed Bitcoin, and that was special because that was the time I finally figured out what it was, because I talked to somebody about it. Anytime you're learning a new thing or you're unsure of a new subject, just talk to somebody about it. Even if they don't know what it is. I hadn't said the words out loud to somebody, and I hadn't had them ask me questions back and me go, I have no idea what that is, and then look it up. And I had a conversation with someone about it. And in that conversation, realized that it's not eGold, realized that it's a communications protocol like HTTP. It's the missing payment system for the internet. And that was really cool when I realized that. Also, I hadn't really considered it as open source software. And I was really big into open source software, still am, but I used to go to like Linux meetup groups. They had these install fest things where you help people install Linux on their computer. I'd go to those and like help out. So I got into the open source side, got really excited about it, bought on the way up to $1,000, watched it crash, and then emotionally dealt with that by just continuing to be a part of it for the next 2 years while it was in this big old winter, because it was still interesting. Nothing had changed in that regard. I could tell that Mt. Gox wasn't Bitcoin, but obviously that was a distinction not everyone got at the time. And I started going to the meetup events. This goes back to like talking about it with people. If you have questions, go to an event. But nowadays, I guess, although we're coming out of COVID, but right now it's go on Discord. If there's a project you like, it's probably got a Discord channel or a Telegram room. It's nuts. There was some DeFi project I was curious about, and I go in and I'm asking questions from like the co-founder. It's like a multi-billion-dollar project, and I'm talking to the guy that made it. So did a lot of meetup events, just kind of volunteering at them. The one that I spent most of my time at was the San Francisco Bitcoin Meetup Group, or the San Francisco Bitcoin Social, I think it was technically called. And it was at one point the largest crypto meetup group in the world.
Wow.
It's certainly the oldest.
How many people were going to this meetup at that time?
Oh, huge numbers, like 100 people. Wow. Like 150 people we'd have sometimes, or like 75 people. Like these were huge numbers at the time. Obviously, like wow, we filled a medium-sized room. Now, obviously, they have enormous conferences with tens of thousands of people at them. But we were pretty shocked because Bitcoin was a lot of action in San Francisco, or New York. A lot of the kind of big city centers had a lot of crypto interest at the time. And I say Bitcoin, like that's all there really was. There was obviously some altcoins at the time, but you meant crypto, you meant Bitcoin. It was the same thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, just helping out events. I'd help stack chairs. Eventually I ended up organizing that event. So I organized the Bitcoin meetup group for a couple of years. And I'm getting into that because at 1 year we did an art show. The San Francisco Bitcoin art show was called Proof of Art, because every month we did an event called Proof of Drink, which was just, we'd go to a bar and drink. And Coinbase would pay for our drinks, and other sponsors would pay for our drinks. Like whoever our sponsor was at the time, it was like, hey, please sponsor us so we can do blockchain education. And then we go buy drinks.
That's awesome.
It actually was quite educational. People would come, they'd ask questions, and you get to talk to people and answer those questions in a very casual format. But yeah, at one of those events, this guy named Crypto Graffiti walks up to me and says, hi, I am a Bitcoin artist. And I had asked him what that was. I knew about people who sold their art for Bitcoin. There had actually been a San Francisco Crypto Craft Fair, I think it was called. It was a craft fair like a year or two before that the meetup group was involved in. But I hadn't heard of someone who did art about Bitcoin. Only used, maybe like accepted as payment like any merchant would. In fact, there was this place called 20 Mission that had a store downstairs called Nakamoto's, and on the wall they'd have artwork for sale for like, point whatever Bitcoin, like $20, whatever it was at the time. But Crypto Graffiti was the first person I met who did art about crypto. And he said he knew a bunch of other people who were similar. And we got talking and we decided to do an art show exclusively about crypto, highlighting crypto artists. It was a physical show. We got donated to us a venue, this place called Coding Canvas. And they were brand new at being a gallery. It was kind of interesting. It was like a co-working space / art gallery / like incubator. And they had just added this new area that was kind of next door that they were going to turn into an art gallery, but it wasn't quite done being assembled yet. But they said, like, if you don't mind it being rough, you can use it. So, I had to sweep the place out, get chairs. We had to paint some of the walls. We had to paint because they weren't done. There wasn't like proper art hanging fixtures. We had to have a lot of easels. I don't know if you know who Dorian Nakamoto is. He was this guy that Newsweek said was Satoshi Nakamoto.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. He is good friends. Well, he's him and Crypto Graffiti know each other because Crypto Graffiti did a piece about him, and he came down for the art show, or I guess he came up for the art show. So I have a photo that I treasure of Satoshi Nakamoto painting the walls at our Bitcoin art show.
That's awesome.
That's amazing.
Which I think that's the legitimacy right there. That is the real Bitcoin art show if Satoshi himself paints the walls. He's not Satoshi. He's just a nice guy who likes trains. That's all he wants to talk about is trains. It's really great. If you ever are hanging out with him somewhere, just ask him about trains. He knows a lot about them. And we had, I try to remember how many artists we had, maybe 5 or 6 artists. It was really fun. We had somebody from like a proof of providence company speak. Like they kind of talked about using blockchain to track physical artwork. And there's actually Mad Bitcoins, who's also helping organize the Bitcoin Meetup group at the time, put the whole thing on his channel. If you go on World Crypto Network, there is, and you kind of search around, you'll see proof of art. And he was walking around the whole time interviewing people, and he was like live streaming and interviewing people, and he cut it all together and put it on his channel. So you kind of like, I think it's like a 20-minute video to kind of see what happened. And at the very beginning, you see us like sweeping and painting. And then at the end, you see all the people who showed up. It was a really fun event, but it was physical. Nothing wrong with that, but it wasn't very scalable. If you had to be in San Francisco to go. And the following year, at another proof of drink event, we were talking about doing it again. We got really close to doing it physically again, and then decided to try something different. We were, I say we, like me, Thomas and Rhett, who created Curio, were really big fans of Rare Pepe, which was this digital collectible on Bitcoin. It was kind of like on a second layer of Bitcoin called Counterparty. Mm-hmm. And it was centered around the Pepe meme, but it was clearly art. It was clearly a rare digital collectible. It was clearly NFT in nature. But it was centered just solely around the Pepe meme. And we knew all these artists. They made amazing crypto artwork. And we'd met more since. And we thought, what if we did Rare Pepe, but with artists, and did it like as an art show? Did like a series of pieces that we released every week. We even thought it could be a business. We thought, hey, this would be really neat. There could be like a marketplace around this. There could be interest. People might like this digital art thing.
And so just from a timeline perspective, is this then about 2016 or so? 17?
Yeah. We started talking about it in 2016, and 2017 is when we kind of started getting serious about it.
Gotcha.
I think 2015 or 2016 is when the physical art show happened. Okay. I think it was almost a year later, or maybe it was a little bit, a year and plus. I mean, all the dates are on, there's really cool NFT timelines out there. And there's this one really great one that I can, I've tweeted before. I can retweet it soon for people who are watching. Just go check out my Twitter. It actually has in the timeline our physical art show as a part of the like history of crypto art, which I think is actually really fun.
Very cool.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, so we did it as an online art show, and it came out May 9th, 2017. And we called it Curio Cards because it was alliterative, and we thought that was fun. We had 7 different artists in total. They did 30 different cards. The way we kind of modeled it more after the like Prince or baseball cards kind of model. So there's multiple copies of each piece, the same way you'd have like multiple copies of a print. The year before, one of the artists had even sold physical prints. It just made a lot of sense to do that model because the prints sold the best. Because you had like these really big pieces from Crypto Graffiti and like, tens of thousands of dollars, these pieces. And then you had somebody selling prints for like $20 a piece. And that was just way more approachable. And we wanted to make something that people could get involved with. They could actually like buy it and have it and hold it and like it. So we commissioned some artwork. The first couple of weeks, we commissioned the artwork ourselves from Philippe. We had to make it, and we kind of chose how many there would be and kind of set it up as a way to raise money for the company. Didn't really sell at all. Nobody cared. So we didn't end up doing that. We didn't end up using the money for the company. They just kind of sat there unsold for a while. We decided to change things a bit. I mean, we were always planning on featuring artists as well, but we were hoping to kind of set up kind of like a platform where they could just kind of go and upload their artwork and just do it themselves. But we didn't have the resource to build something like that. So we said, okay, we'll just do what we did before. We'll do it for them. It's a nicer user experience anyway. They don't have to have Ethereum. They don't have to know how any of this stuff works. And each week we released another artist's work. And the rest is history.
There's a lot there that I want to like kind of break down piece by piece,
yes,
because
please.
it seems like in recent history or in the last couple of months, a lot of people are discovering Curio Cards and that kind of thing. So for the first part, you mentioned 7 different artists were part of that. How were those artists chosen? Were those specifically the people who were involved with the physical show, or how were those people chosen?
Some of it was people we knew. So like obviously Crypto Graffiti was in there. And then CryptoPop, who one of the people who worked with us knew them and reached out to them. They're another big artist. A lot of them, were just people who we knew as names in the space. And that's actually kind of a nice thing now that people care about Curio Cards again, is these aren't just, these are artists that have continued to be in the space since. So it's kind of like if people who are already fans of them say, wow, wait, there's earlier works for this artist that I really like. So that's been really cool. If people kind of rediscovering that the artists they've been following in NFTs for a while. Robeck World was a notable example because he was not someone that we knew before. He was someone who showed up in the community. And this was kind of the dream. The dream was it was going to be the Curio name. It's not only alliterative, and Curio is obviously like a curiosity, a rare, antique object. But it also, to me, I thought like curated. I like the idea that this was something that would be community curated, again, with the alliteration. We wanted it to be an open platform that anybody could submit to, but we didn't want it to just be like a crazy show, because like Rare Pepe, for instance, they had a curation process. You'd submit artwork and they'd kind of go through it and they'd pick winners. And we wanted to have a way that people who owned cards could pick winners, and anybody could make a card, but there'd be kind of like some featured curated cards. So that was the dream. So when Robeck showed up in the chat and he's like, hey, I'm interested in this project. I'm a digital artist. I'd love to submit. That was really cool. He was someone who came to us. We didn't know him before. He found Curio. And we also set up a Google form that anybody could apply to. And we got 2 of our artists that way, including one of our artists, Daniel Friedman. He was doing line work, like a pencil and pen line work. So his artwork there's physical versions of it as well. And Marsala as well did like a mixed media. There are actually physical versions of those cards that you can see, but then they also kind of, I think, did something to them in Photoshop as well. So a mix of people we knew, a mix of people who found us.
One of the things I'm curious about is this took place so early on in, when NFTs was a concept that hadn't really been established yet. And even touching on the Rare Pepe, you mentioned that was kind of built on like a side chain of Bitcoin. And so what I'm curious about is the technology aspect of it. How did you go about creating these Curio cards, and how did that differ from how the Rare Pepe project worked? The fact that was on some side chain of Bitcoin. You don't really hear about NFTs on Bitcoin, so that's interesting in itself.
Yeah, which I think is kind of a shame, because the first NFTs were on Bitcoin. I'm not going to sit here and claim that Curio Cards was the very first NFT. There were art projects on Bitcoin. The only 2 sort of big ones, though, was Rare Pepe and something called Spells of Genesis. I think there were other, like, obviously people have the technology, they could just, make cards. I think people have found random bits of NFTs on Bitcoin since, but those were really the only 2 projects. And we looked at them as inspiration. I believe both of them started before Ethereum existed. And at the time, there were limitations to how those platforms worked. So obviously, Bitcoin has a 10-minute block time, and Counterparty has the same. Counterparty is it's sort of like it's something called colored coins, which was also, people can say, was kind of an NFT as well earlier on. I actually went to an event where the speaker on stage made some colored coins for the event and then gave them to anybody in the audience who installed the wallet. And I kind of think in the back of my head, those might have been the very first like ticket event NFTs.
Huh.
Although I can't confirm that. And Counterparty was similar. It was, you take a Bitcoin or, but like a tiny fraction of it that doesn't actually real value itself. And you'd put, and you'd say, this isn't a Bitcoin. This is a Counterparty asset. And on Counterparty, you'd say what it actually is. So like, that's how a Rare Pepe was. It was a small piece of Bitcoin that was, dust, right? It was like a couple bucks, but they said, no, it's actually this thing that's worth tens of thousands. And they just kind of put that reference into the base Bitcoin. So it was still Bitcoin, but with like an information layer on top.
Interesting.
And so they had all the same benefits to Bitcoin, the security, but also it's the same downsides, the 10-minute block times, the long confirmations. And at the time, what felt like expensive gas, cost a couple bucks in gas. And we were like, wow, that's too much. Now, obviously, people pay hundreds of dollars in gas just to ape into the latest, yield farming thing. But I think it was really important for art that gas was cheap, because there was no real understanding of the value of the art. It was in a lot of ways a non-financial use case, which I think is one of the things I really liked about NFTs, because obviously anybody who got Bitcoin, they loved the idea of, it's store of value, it's money, it's gold, whatever. And we had appealed to those people in my mind. Obviously there was a larger market, but people who weren't interested in the financial use cases, they often say, what are the non-financial use cases? And something people would say would be like ownership rights, or NFTs, using it as a distributed ledger, proof of existence. And for that, like, I'll pay a couple $100 to make money, right? To like get into some loan or interest bearing thing, because I'm going to make more. But to pay a couple $100 to move a card on a game or to get a piece of digital asset, like where there's no expectation or guarantee of return, it doesn't work as well. So yeah, we looked at, Ethereum was out. We said, hey, this thing's fast. It's super cheap. Ethereum was crazy cheap at the time. And the smart contracts will let us have a lot more granularity in what the cards can do. We had kind of ideas that these things could be a lot more interactive than Counterparty could. We saw them as a way for fans to interact with artists that they liked, almost like a Patreon, a way that they could just communicate directly with those artists. And to Rare Pepe's credit, there was a project called DJ Pepe. And if you had a DJ Pepe card, you could get access to a Telegram room that the DJ Pepe guy was in. And we liked that kind of stuff. We want to do that, but that was kind of like the cutting, bleeding edge of what Counterparty could do. And there were a lot of kind of caveats and centralization issues in that. We wanted to take that. We want to do a lot more. We want to have a lot more interactivity. We also were really excited about this thing called IPFS, Interplanetary File System, which that same project has since released something called Filecoin, right, which is sort of the missing piece of IPFS. It's a way of making IPFS more decentralized. So IPFS is decentralized in that anybody can host a node, anybody can hold files, and I can't take those files down. No one can take them down. But someone has to host a node. Someone has to do the work of hosting the files. And if nobody does, the file vanishes. Filecoin, they're trying to incentivize that. Actually, hey, you can actually pay people to host your files. So we wanted to use IPFS as a way of decentralized, holding the images. I actually am not super sure technically. I knew at the time how Rare Pepe stored its images, but there was a centralization component to it. I believe they were stored on some server somewhere, but I apologize if that's incorrect. And because again, I had nothing but respect for that project. It was just something that we wanted to do differently. So Curio Cards, we took an IPFS hash, which is sort of like the representation of the image, and it's also used to find the image on the IPFS network, and we put that into the contract, into the card. So which means if you have the card and the file is being hosted on some node somewhere, you can find the artwork. There's no way for that to go down. There's no server that can go down. There's no website that can go down. And you see people today actually kind of get that wrong on new projects.
Ulf, do you realize our audience has been either watching or listening to this episode for 20 minutes?
20 minutes? No, they should probably subscribe.
Yeah, they should subscribe. And if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you comment and turn on notifications. And if you're listening to this podcast, especially if you're on Apple Podcasts, leave us a rating and a review.
We're also on Twitter, Instagram, and even TikTok. So go check out the episode description. You can find all that information below. And we have an update on the NFT, don't we?
That's right. We didn't previously mention this, but this NFT for OG supporter is a one of one. There will only be one of this kind ever minted, and we have a few surprises for the person who purchases it. The link is in the episode description.
And back to the episode.
So one thing I'm curious about, Travis, is, you guys creating this project on Ethereum, you probably knew, at least somewhat at the time, CryptoPunks comes out afterward, and there's a lot of talk about, CryptoPunks being the first NFT project. And for you, in the back of your mind, was that something that concerned you, or that you wanted to kind of set the record straight? And then on top of that, I'm going to kind of give you a two-part question here. There's a lot of tribalism within the crypto community when it comes to coins or projects, which makes sense because it's what people are invested in. And I would assume that it's the same type of thing with NFTs, that if I have Curio Cards, well, there's value in me protecting the fact that it's historically earlier, or that type of thing. In your mind, is that a bad thing, having tribalism in the system? So sorry, kind of a two-part question there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to add to something I said previously when I was listing all the amazing technical things that we did for Curio, that, me, Tom, and Rhett, we'd all talk about these great ideas, but Rhett did it. Rhett's the one who then took those ideas and made the first Curio smart contract. And we had nothing to look at. I think there were some other people kind of tinkering with the idea, but nothing was out. So Rhett had to figure out how to make an NFT on Ethereum from scratch. And the only thing that really existed at the time was this type of token called an ERC20, which was used for ICOs. It's just your basic fungible token. And he had to turn that into a non-divisible, rare collectible. And he also put them into these things we call vending machines, which let anybody be able to send money to Ethereum and get art back. And that's now how minting works in the 721 token standard. So non-divisibility, that minting, that having IPFS, all rolled up into a token. That was, I think it's really important to state how impressive it was what Rhett accomplished with that code. And if he hadn't been on the project, you wouldn't be sitting here right now. You'd be talking to somebody else. So I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that. I'm not trying to take credit.
A follow-up to that, just going further into the vending machines, what specifically kind of was that experience? Because my understanding is that there were more cards available, and then there was a certain amount of time to buy them, and then there were cards burned or something along those lines. Do you mind explaining what that user process was like in 2017 if you wanted to acquire a card?
Yeah. Similar to how Rhett couldn't look at some existing code to figure out how to make these, we couldn't look at existing projects to figure out mechanics or how to interact, how people should interact with these things. We didn't know how supply should work. We didn't know how that interaction should work. So we said, okay, let's do this. Let's make 100,000 cards. And for one, so the first week we had card 1, 2, and 3, which is apple, nuts, and berries. And it's kind of this story of gatherers and beginning the idea of sharing and creating, society. And we made 100,000 of each of them. And the idea was people can buy as much as they want. We sold them for $1 each, right? And at the end of the week, whatever didn't sell, we'd destroy, we'd burn. And let everyone else figure out how many there should exist. It goes to that kind of community curation idea. We wanted to be as hands off as possible. We wanted to have as little of our own foot on the scale as we could. So, or thumb on the scale as we could. So we did it that way. We only really loaded up the first 2,000 into the vending machines because we figured, if those empty out, we'll go ahead and we'll do the rest. Big aspiration, big hope, but it wasn't too crazy at the time. People were putting, millions of dollars into ICOs, and we thought this is cooler. This are the tokens are a thing. They're an actual physical, this is art. An ICO token is a promise to one day be a company. Whereas here, you can have the thing immediately. You bought something, it's yours, no promise required. But they didn't really sell. but you can see how much sold obviously by looking at the supply of those first 10 cards. You can see that like apples, I think there's like 1,000 or something of them. And that means that number was bought. And since we never really hit the 2,000 limit on any of them, and a lot of them didn't, like none of them sold out, we never loaded up the other 98,000 in. And they just kind of were somewhere, but they're not buyable. And at the end of the week, we'd burn them as well. So none of them survived. And the problem with that was it was kind of inverse. Really popular cards that people really liked had tons of supply, and really like crappy cards that no one liked.
Right. Yeah.
They were rare and beautiful, right? Which I kind of thought that was really funny, because you're also like taking the thing people don't like and you're making it better. You're like, hey, how about now? It's rare.
Yeah.
But the feedback was that wasn't as funny as I thought. And the going forward, we told the artists, you can choose how many you can have. With the exception of the very first artist, Crypto Graffiti, we said, you can choose as many as you want. But if you pick 2,000, that'd be really great, because we wouldn't have to remake the vending machine contract. And he said, sure, do 2,000. So we kind of influenced his decision there. But after that, the artists, they chose how many. And anything that didn't sell, we burned. So the supply of those first 10, except for, I should say, number 10. Number 10, we thought, at this point, we're like, okay, we'll just leave number 10 and we'll keep doing the artist cards. And if people like get interested, they can always come back and buy number 10. Because the idea still with those first 10 cards was it could be a way of kind of raising seed capital. But again, nobody cared, so we didn't do that. The money sat in the vending machines until until now, when suddenly they all sold out, and we sent the money to artists, and funds were donated to different people for doing work, and we sorted it all out later. The only artist that sold out in 2017 was Robeck, so we were able to send all the money to him right when that happened.
And then going back to what I was saying before, so the historical significance of this, and the fact that, in crypto, there's this tribalism depending on which coin you have and that kind of thing. So is that something that those involved with Curio Cards, or I guess those who own it, have been trying to really educate NFT collectors perhaps on the value of that? And then also your thoughts on some of the tribalism that happens.
Yeah, so you originally were asking about specifically like with punks, because CryptoPunks came out, I think it was like 3 weeks or a month after us. And I thought that was a really cool project. Back then, no one was saying like, but they're first or you're first. No one really spoke about being first, because it was this thing that nobody cared about, that we were just trying. Early on, CryptoPunks, they were like, you want some, take them, they're free. And nobody wanted them. And we're like, hey, they're $1. You want some, take them. And nobody was taking them. And we would even like give them out. Like I went and I just bought a bunch with my own money. And then in the Telegram room, I'd be like, who wants cards? And crickets. But sometimes you'd be like, I'll take some. And I was like, here's 5 apples. Just to like try to get people excited. I spent all that time trying to convince people to buy these things, which is why people think I have like a ton of cards. Like, no, I like my life was trying to convince other people to buy these things. But anyway, so there wasn't really a, negative issue or anything with punks. I even ran into the people who made CryptoPunks at this art conference crypto art conference in New York, Rare AF. And I think the conversation did come up, which one came out first? And I kind of answered from the crowd. I'm like, oh, hey, you hear about Curio Cards? And everyone's like, no. But some people had, because it was a small community back then. But yeah, they were really nice. There was never like an issue. There was never any kind of, rivalry or anything at the time. And I continue to think that CryptoPunks was an extremely cool project. The generative art approach, which then Crypto Kitties obviously took to the extreme, letting anybody generate their own kitty. I think that's a really cool idea. We had to, but that's why I guess why I was never really thinking of us as rivals, because we were very different. We were a platform for artists to release their original artwork, and punks and kitties, they were there's one artist, right? For CryptoPunks, there's one artist. Maybe there's a small team, but there's just like one group. They make all the different art assets, and then it's generative art from there. So we just kind of always felt very different. In terms of like modern day tribalism, I think a nice way of framing that, because obviously like I see it in Bitcoin, there's a lot of Bitcoin tribalism, but another way of you could think about that is community. And And a lot of like the value of these projects is kind of tied to the value of its community. There's also other elements, the rarity, the how good the art is, the story. But a strong community is going to create a strong project because these are open source projects. If somebody tomorrow wanted to release like a Curio browser or something, Curio gallery, they can. In fact, the Curio gallery that's on the website, I didn't make it. Somebody in our Discord channel made it, and we're like, cool, that looks nice. So I think community is really positive. I think it's a bad thing when it gets like toxic, when it's we are better than them, they suck, we are the only true thing, everything else is a scam. And we are very we're very aggressive about that in our Discord. We have the Bill and Ted be excellent to everyone be excellent to each other is like the motto of the server. You can come in and you can talk about how great any project is, but you can't come in and say like Curio is better than Punks suck, because like I'm going to jump in because I like them. I like Curio more, maybe a little biased. But I'm allowed that. But I have nothing bad to say about the other project. They're extremely innovative as well. And it's a very small space. We have more in common than we have different.
Switching gears here a little bit, I wanted to get into the numbers of the cards. There's 30 cards altogether. And a second sort of follow up to that point is number 17. There was actually a misprint. Can you give us some context around, why was it 30 that was chosen? Was that just at random, or is there significance there? And what's the story behind number 17 and the 17B misprint?
30 we kind of came to organically. We didn't want to just like do one card a week because that seemed kind of like nobody would care. And every card was work. Early on, every card was a lot of work. There were the tools back then to launch contracts were kind of terrible, smart contracts. And Rhett had to like manually deploy each contract using all sorts of, janky combination of tools, using contracts that he'd kind of whipped up himself. So there was like no standard things that he could use. We had testing was not great. The testnets weren't, really everything. And MetaMask technically existed, but it was kind of like a early beta project that people will kind of talk about. And they'd say, I don't think that's a good idea because you have to install a plugin. That makes the user experience harder. It's an extra step. And we're trying to make crypto easier. Because meanwhile, Rare Pepe, you didn't have to install a plugin. They had a web wallet that would load seeds into like local storage or something like that. And that was really nice. And there was this wallet called my Ethereum wallet or my Ether wallet, and it all worked in browser. So we used that. But it just meant it was really hard to test this stuff, really hard to make sure it worked when it deployed. And the first couple of cards, we actually had 3 different prices. It was kind of like a Kickstarter model. You buy like the first 100 cost this much, the next 100 cost that much, and then the other ones cost more. And so if you get to buy the early ones, they're cheaper. But that was 3 separate vending machines for each card. So 3 cards, 3 vending machines. That's 9 vending machines plus the cards. 12 contracts. The Red had to deploy, verify, test, and he had to do it really in a very short period of time. Because once it's on the blockchain, people can see it. We have to announce it soon. Otherwise, people are going to go buy it. And this did happen. People will go buy cards before we officially announced them. And if the early cards sell out in that window, we kind of failed people, right? People who are following our project in our Discord and being like super loyal. We didn't like let them know quick enough to buy the cards that were cheap. And that's not great. So we picked 3 because 5 would have been too hard and 1 would have been too boring. And number 10, then we launched by itself. And so it's kind of like we kind of rounded up to 10. So it was, 3, 3, 3, and then 10. And then we just kind of kept that method going. Each artist, we said you can have 3 cards. It led to, like for instance, one of the artists, CryptoPop, he actually submitted 4 originally, and he is now selling that 4th one on OpenSea. Like this is like, hey, here is like the original art that I submitted to Curio Cards. we picked these three together, and this one didn't make the cut. And he's now selling it, which is kind of cool. Not like official Curio card, but like, here's a piece of history. Here's like the original art file that he submitted back in 2017. It was like that close to being one of the first NFTs. So we just kind of did 333 and then 20 and then 3333 and then 30. And at that point, just nothing was really happening. There wasn't really a lot of interest. I go on podcasts like this and interviews, and I spend the entire time explaining to people why digital art had value. Whereas we haven't talked about that at all. And that's amazing. That's like assumed that this has value now. So we just kind of ended it there.
And then,
round number.
And then 17B, how did that all work?
So all three of those cards were actually misprinted. 17, 18, and 19 were all three double created. Rhett was doing his usual thing, and he launched all three cards. And then something happened with the vending machines, I believe, on 18 and 19. They didn't work. You couldn't actually buy 18 and 19. So, I figured out the problem, and it's like, great, we'll just like do it over. And, this is early Ethereum, where production was the test net. You just do it on, and then you'd be like, no, it's not that contract, it's this contract. And you'd be like, all right, sure. Nobody cared about but the deploy date on this one is technically this earlier than this one, and nobody cared about that. So Rhett just redid all three because it was easier. He had his whole scripts in place. He just reran all three. So the 17 we sold officially was actually an hour older than 17B. But it was the one we officially announced to people and said, here is 17. And no one had bought 17B, so we figured it was fine. Although I found out recently that one person managed to buy a 17B back in 2017 in the window between 17B and 17. So they technically were an original buyer of that 17. We hadn't announced it yet though, or I think we had. I don't remember the details. We gave them a 17. I just donated my 17 to them. It's like, you bought the real thing at the time. Here's the real card. But people, when they rediscovered Curio, found 17B along with all the other ones. I had completely forgotten about it, but they found all the cards that hadn't sold out, which was kind of great. If I had had the power of, someone who runs a company now, like a centralized company to, turn the switch off and shut things down, I would have turned the vending machines off, because I saw them as this kind of liability, because if anybody bought them, this money goes to the vending machine, and then I have to go track down the artist and give the money to the artist. And I thought no, we close the thing out. It's done. So I took the vending machine information off the webpage, but I left all the card information up for historical records. If you had cards and you wanted the contracts, you can add it to your wallet. I'm not going to take that away. So that was all on the website, but the vending machines are all gone. And because I couldn't turn the vending machines off, they were there full of cards when people refound Curio. And that means the new people had Curio cards. So they weren't just saying hey, we found this old thing, look at it. They were like, hey, we found this old thing. I have some of them. Do you want some of them? And then people started trading. And that was critical, I think, to people caring about Curio in the modern day. So since then, old wallets have also come back and said hey, I have some old cards, I'll sell them to you. But that early trading was people really just trading the cards that hadn't sold out. So really the least popular cards were all the early trades.
Between 2018, I guess, or so, and now, or, and a little while ago, had you basically not thought of Curio cards in a while? Was it something that was kind of off your mind?
Yeah, it can never really be off my mind because there were a lot of unanswered questions about it. There were still those vending machines out there that I'd get nervous about, because I'd be like, man, if someone finds these things and buys all the cards and then contacts me and says hey, I gave you money, support my cards. And I'm like, sorry, I couldn't, tell you, don't do that. We stopped meeting about this thing. And, now I got to figure out how to give that money to the artist, etc. There was a Discord server that I kept active, and people would pop in every now and then and ask, hey, what happened with Curio cards? Or hey, I have some cards, how do I see them? And I'd be like, oh, cool, we have this gallery tool and blah, blah, blah. Just kind of ongoing technical support.
Right.
It's sort of the downside of an open source immutable project is you can never walk away from it.
Yeah.
So I definitely felt responsibility to that. So I manned the lights, at the old Discord server. But I wasn't planning on doing anything with it. because when people started figuring out NFTs, and it's got an SNL skit, and and everyone's talking about them. I look around and I saw really things doing what we wanted to do. There were platforms where you could go, upload your artwork, put in how many you wanted, hit create, and it spit out NFTs. And it was a beautiful, easy user experience. They'd feature your cards. People would curate. They'd say here's the ones that are most popular right now. They had active support. They were funded companies. They had support channels full of people. If somebody stole someone's artwork and uploaded it, they had people who could moderate that content and figure it out. And it's these people they're doing it. Mission accomplished. I don't need to drag my project out and do a worse job than what they were doing as fully funded, well-staffed companies. So whenever somebody would ask me, hey, I want to make cards, I'd be like, check out one of these 5 projects. They're really, really great. I've heard nothing but good things.
One of the things I want to ask you about, it might be a silly question, but I'll ask it anyways. Some of the cards, I think 11 to 16, obviously resemble businesses or that kind of, Heineken, Coca-Cola, Wendy's logo is very similar.
Mm-hmm. And some banks.
And some banks. And if these really start to escalate in value, they already have. But if it continues to go and go and go, and it gets anything to the level of where CryptoPunks is at, do you think there's any chance or recourse of some of these companies and taking trademark infringement steps or anything along those lines? Or what are your thoughts behind those specific cards?
I wouldn't be surprised if it happened. I'm also not expecting it to happen. But if I got, an email or somebody came in the Discord tomorrow, I don't really check my email. So if you do want to issue a cease and desist, please do it in the Discord. They would, I wouldn't be surprised that it happened because I understand that argument. I am not a legal scholar, but I believe that parody is protected speech. I know parody is done quite a lot in the art world. I do know that but if you want to comply with that cease and desist, it doesn't matter. Even if it's it's protected by law, right? Parody is allowed. If you're a website that sells T-shirts, and I'm using this as an example because this happened with one of the artists, they took the same artwork and they sold T-shirts for it, and they received some kind of notice from some kind of trademark lawyer. And even though I think technically they didn't have to comply, it's not their fight. They don't care. So they took the shirts off. So Curio Cards, the image survived in Curio Cards where it failed, to survive in merchandising. That's kind of cool. There is limited things that I can do to take the card down, which is why I think I'm not looking to do a long, giant legal fight. There is no Curio company. We don't have vast treasuries and reserves of funds and teams of lawyers. But since it's actually really hard for me to comply with any kind of request, I don't think we really would. The artwork is on IPFS. I can ask people to turn their nodes off, but I can't make anybody turn their nodes off. I don't even know who all the nodes are. In fact, between 2017 and 2021, the art survived because people out there hosting nodes. I had a node, but I wasn't the only one. And in fact, my node had stopped working, I found out, but the art was still visible. So someone out there, a number of people were still hosting nodes. And at this point now, there's a lot of people hosting nodes because it's just kind of a fun thing to do. And we encourage it. The cards themselves are Ethereum assets that have no backdoor keys, they're immutable. This is before upgradable contracts were a thing. So I don't have the ability to do that. And the hash in the artwork is just the IPFS hash. It doesn't have a web URL gateway, which you do see in some modern NFT projects. They'll have their website / the IPFS hash. And that's unfortunate because if their website ever goes down, the link is broken. You could pull the IPFS hash out maybe and say this is the thing, but you'd have to do that manually. And some projects don't even do that. They just it's a link to an image, and they kind of lose that cool factor of an NFT where it's immutable. If their company ever goes down or their server turns off or that website experiences any issue, the artwork's gone. Or if they receive a cease and desist, they may want to comply with it. I don't really know what my response would be. All I know is my hands are tied about the extent to which I could do. I'm not really sure.
So one of the things I want to be, we've had a couple of guests on, and we've talked a little bit about ethics in the sense of like, there's a lot of crypto, I don't know if I want to say influencers, but like podcast hosts, YouTube, whatever, and some channels really promote certain coins and that kind of thing. And it's just interesting. We've debated with a few guests in terms of like, there's some of these YouTube hosts who will say, I would never talk about a coin that I don't personally own. And I just find that like an interesting thing, because it's like, I don't know if that makes it better. Like you're talking about, so it's going to like increase the value, that kind of thing. So I want to be transparent with our audience. I do own some Curio cards since I learned about the project. I think I have 7 or something like that. Ulf doesn't own any.
You're in the Discord, right?
Yeah. I jumped in the Discord and everything like that. So I just wanted to be transparent with the audience. But I wanted to go back to something you were saying of the fact that your role was to really get other people to purchase these cards. You were even giving them away and that kind of thing. And I heard you on another interview talking about that the founders, your process was kind of the same as anyone else in terms of you would have to purchase these from the vending machine and go through that. Yeah. But I just think that's interesting. Like, do you mind speaking to that a little bit, of just maybe like dispelling the thoughts of maybe the fact you're sitting on all of these cards or something along those lines? Or do you know in terms of kind of the distribution, like how many people own full sets of Curio cards, for example?
Yeah, I don't think there's like an ethical problem with a team that creates a project that issues a governance token having some of those tokens. I actually think kind of makes sense they do. But I really love the fair launches that were briefly popular after Yearn did it, where they didn't keep any tokens for, like, back in the ICO days in 2017. You'd see it was all pie charts on everyone's website. They had a token pie chart and be like, this wedge is for the team, this wedge is for our initial funders, and then this wedge is what we're actually selling, and then this wedge is for like a nonprofit organization that'll promote the company or whatever. And then Yearn, they just said like, no, we're giving them all away. And the way they've gotten, their own token so that they can also be staking their project is they take some of their revenue and they buy the token, they buy it back. So they have to buy it like anybody else. They're kind of investing in themselves, which is something any company should do. And they don't buy them back and then burn them. They buy them back and they vest them as like equity to employees. Sort of like how like Amazon, does stock to employees or whatever. So there are ways that a project can own its own asset that I think are very ethical and great. What you were saying about how when an influencer will say like, I'm only going to talk about tokens I personally own. Well, then all the project has to do is give them tokens and be like, hey, if I give you tokens, will you talk about it? And be like, yeah, I can, because in fact, I can only talk about it if you give me tokens. If you are looking to buy something, don't buy it just because like your favorite YouTuber or influencer or I said to get it. Buy it because you like it. And if you really like it, then you're also generally not buying it to like flip it. You're going to buy it, wait for it to spike, and then those kind of pump and dump things. Everybody wants to do pump and dumps. Buy the thing you like, and then hold it for a long time. Join the community, make it worth more. Help out. Tell people about it. Like you're kind of at that point, you're responsible for sharing. You're responsible for telling people about it. You're an investor. You care about the project. For Curio cards, we didn't really see it as like an ICO. We weren't trying to sell a token to raise funds. We saw it as like a product. We're selling art. We're selling digital prints. And by the way, like that was really cool because if you're a digital artist before NFTs, the only way you could make money was you go work for Pixar or you go work for Blizzard, right? You go work for like a animation house of some kind, or you start a independent game developer, right? You productize your art in some way and you can sell that, but you can't sell the digital artwork the same way you can sell physical artwork. And we thought like, we're going to sell digital artwork directly. So we kind of saw that as almost like just a store, we're a merchant store, and we sell something and that's revenue. For the artist cards, whenever we were almost kind of like an Etsy kind of thing, where the artist would come and sell their work and then the money would go to them. But we didn't take a commission on any of that. It all 100% went to them because we figured a company could exist in this sort of the space between users and cards. You need a place to trade cards. You need a place to do things with cards. We thought we could supply like services. We could create like an ecosystem of services around these cards. And in that case, we really didn't want to have our fingers on the profit of selling the cards, because it would kind of create weird incentives of, we're offering services for something that, that we're getting paid to create. And it just seemed odd. We didn't really quite know why it seemed odd. Now, the first 10 cards, we thought, okay, we'll just buy these directly from Philippe, the artist. We kind of will commission it from him. And the money raised on those will be seed funding. And from there on out, though, all the money goes to the artist. We'll use that seed funding to build an exchange, build an auction house, do things like that. When they didn't really sell, we didn't end up doing that. The money was, at that point, we said, Philippe, you can have this back. They ended up, there were, I don't want to get into details actually, because I don't think he said it publicly, but, donations occurred to like different people who helped build things and whatnot. But like at that point, we kind of gave up on that idea. So all of the cards that I have, I went to the vending machine and I bought myself. If I'm buying from the vending machine and the money in the vending machine goes to me, then obviously like that's the same thing as getting cards for free. But yeah, the vending machine money didn't ultimately go to me. I've spent more money on this project than I've made. I don't think I've made any money directly from the project, other than if I were to sell Curio Cards, which I haven't actually sold any cards yet either, because of that weird ethical question. And what does it look like when an early creator starts unloading their cards, especially so early? I know we're 4 years in, but it's kind of early in that people are just now finding it.
I wanted to actually note, because this is something Wade and I were talking about as well. We've had this conversation around ethics through influencers and people who promote projects, but I actually think that there's a bit of a difference in the argument when we're talking about NFTs versus buying coins for a given project that are your standard fungible tokens, because they're all individual, right? So if we're talking about something that is an NFT, what is unethical about promoting a product, let's say a product line where you own one or more of those products? And what I mean by that is, like, for example, I own let's say a collectible Pokemon card, like a real life Pokemon card. And I go on a show and I say, guys, Pokemon cards are still really cool. I really think you guys should go buy Pokemon cards. And whether or not I even disclose that I own a Pokemon card, is that the same as promoting something that's fungible, where every $1 is worth $1, and if it goes up to $2, they're all worth $2? It's not really the same if I'm talking about an NFT, because my NFT might not be worth your NFT is, even though they're both maybe, brilliant Charizard or whatever they're called. They're still two different versions of a product, and I'm just promoting the product line or the brand. So I think there's a difference there as well, right? There's a distinction.
It also matters because in that example, like the Pokemon Corporation didn't call you up and say, we will give you money to talk about Pokemon. You are someone who likes Pokemon, has Pokemon, and maybe you weren't thinking of it as a like altruistic, I want to support the things I love. Maybe you're thinking like, I'm going to talk this up, get it way more popular, and then flip it, right? Sell it. I think intent matters. Like when it becomes ethical, it's like, what are you trying to accomplish? If you're talking about a thing that you are passionately in love with the community and you want to share it with your friends. I mean, I told a lot of friends about how great Bitcoin was, but there was no Bitcoin Corporation telling me to do that or paying me to do that. But also, like, I did receive financial gain if I somehow were able to move the needle on Bitcoin popularity. And like Bitcoin would go way up in price because of my advocacy for it. I think like the intent matters. I think also the size of your audience matters. Like the more you have the ability to move that needle, the more responsibility you have to take for how you word things. If I just joined the Curio Discord as like a member, I'd be like, these cards are the best, the greatest, everyone buy them. Like the people do that. And I'm like, I love that energy. But as one of the faces of the project, along with the artists and the other creators, I am a lot more careful about my words. I'll say all the great things about them. I'm not going to try to lower their value. I'm going to, when somebody asks me a question about a way that Curio is really great, like, hey, is it really the first art NFT, Ethereum? I'd be like, yeah, of course. And like, here's the transaction hash, and here it's really great. But I'm not going to go and say, I'm putting quotes in the air because I'm not actually saying this. I'm not going to say like, buy these and you will get rich, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say things like, do you like the cards? Do you like the project? Then yeah, think about making that decision, right? I'm going to be a way less like do the thing than a member of the community would. So yeah, the size of your audience is going to moderate your responsibility and your word choice.
I want to ask you just what you make of the focus on Curio Cards and NFTs in general. So this year, this has been one of the big stories of the last year, I think, is the popularity of NFTs and the fact that it has been a gateway for so many coming into the space. But specifically Curio Cards, I mean, the likes of even like Gary Vaynerchuk, who's tweeted about it a couple of times, and there's a lot of big names who are aware of it and talking about it. Is that something that has surprised you? Or when you did see how CryptoPunks was, kind of blowing up and the values going up, did you kind of think in the back of your mind it might just be a matter of time before Curio Cards is discovered and people understand the historical significance?
So like, first of all, I obviously have always thought the digital art field was like a really great idea, especially to what you were saying about how people who are outside of crypto know about NFTs, right? People who don't know anything about Bitcoin know about NFTs. And that is not really that was a theory at the time, but it's not like a new idea. The idea was that this is a way we can reach a new audience. We have well-oiled machinery to reach people who love Bitcoin and Ethereum and gold and, sovereignty and all the open source software. Like we have, well-oiled ways of reaching those people. But let's start demonstrating some use cases, right? Let's start like demonstrating other ways you can do this thing. And like art is not only a great way to get people, to know about a thing because everyone kind of understands, what art is or collectibles, but also you're going to the people who are really good at communicating. Artists are great at communicating. It's what they do. And you're taking your complicated, messy thing, crypto, and you're saying, okay, can you explain to people how this works through your art? That's win-win. That's great. And NFTs have done that. People understand crypto through NFTs. You learn the acronym. When you learn what NFT means, you kind of learn what FT, right? You learn what fungible tokens are at the same time. And you start understanding Bitcoin a little bit more. Also, just like realizing that technology allows this teaches you something about how the technology works. Because now you're explaining, because the common question people ask is, why can't I just copy the image? And once you really like get someone to understand the answer to that, you just taught them how digital scarcity works. And that's what makes a Bitcoin valuable. The fact that you can't counterfeit it, unique value. So, yeah, I mean, I completely agree. Like NFTs are a great way to get the word out. In terms of like Curio getting the word out, I wasn't really sure. I kind of figured that people just didn't really care about what was first. I know that CryptoPunks would talk about being first, and I understood their argument because there is a very specific type of NFT that we are not that. Like I said, we're different, right? We were doing original artwork. They were doing generative. They have their set of 10,000, whereas we have prints. And I just figured they were kind of claiming first in that category without giving the detail, which I understand the marketing decision on that. If you're going to be like, we're first, see addendum. And there's like a 3-paragraph thing explaining the different ways that art can exist, right? And that there's prints and casts and collectibles and like back in 2017 and 2016 too, like the NFT space was all about exploration. It's about like, what is art? And there are many different kinds of NFTs and there are different ways of doing collectibles. And I just kind of figured that we were an unpopular type of NFT. But then the conversation shifted. People started wanting to know the full history. And that's complicated, right? We have to talk about Rare Pepe and Spells of Genesis and all the different and Counterparty, and nobody even knows about Counterparty anymore. It's big at the time, but I have to like, oh yeah, there's this thing called Counterparty. It works like this. I think that's a really important conversation to have, because art is very flexible. The art world has many different forms and mediums, collectible world as well. But I didn't think it was like a guarantee that people would care about Curio again. I also hadn't really considered the cards left in the vending machine as a way of new people being involved. I kind of figured the only way that Curio could really happen again is if old holders came with their cards and said, we want to tell you about this thing, and we want to get this thing listed on OpenSea, and we want to get this thing modernized, because Curio doesn't work on OpenSea. We came out before OpenSea existed. The token standard that we created is not compatible. So you have to build something called a wrapper, which takes Curio cards and puts it inside of a compatibility container, wraps it up, and then that's what you sell on OpenSea. And there's really no reason to ever unwrap. You can kind of look at it and say, yeah, the card's there. It's fine. It's like in a sleeve, like a collectible. Mm-hmm. But also having the ability to unwrap obviously is important too. So you have to build a wrapper that does both. That's a really hard thing to do. It takes a lot of resources and time and people who care a lot about it. Also, like the idea that I just described of wrapper is a very new idea. We didn't really know how to do that before. Like, okay, do we upgrade by making new Curio cards that are compatible and airdropping them on the holders, and then they just kind of like ignore their old ones? Do we make a thing where you give the old card, it burns it and issues a new card? It's kind of like, you call it a one-way wrapper. And then more recently, people are like, oh, you can do this thing called a wrapper. And I'm like, that's a great idea. So I didn't see where that energy was going to come from. And people buying up the old vending machines and then being like, we demand a wrapper. And suddenly you have a large community of people working on a wrapper, and there's energy and vigor and resources to pull it off. Was absolutely incredible. I mean, we went from like no wrapper to wrapper in like a couple of weeks.
And when was that? When was the wrapper created?
So March was when Curio, or April was when Curio was discovered, I think. March was when it was discovered. I think April's when the wrapper came out. It was like a couple weeks later. Wow. All of the information is, obviously in the Twitter timeline. Oh, I can pull up the tweet. It's the pinned tweet on @myCurioCards on Twitter. The pinned tweet is like announcing the wrapper. So look at the date. Cool, and that's when the wrapper came out. And there's a YouTube video explaining how to use the wrapper. A friend of mine did like voiceover for it. It's great.
And we'll link to those accounts in our description as well. So I guess the question then, before we kind of get to the final part of this, is what's the future look like? I mean, do you ever see a Curio Card 2.0? I don't know if that would make sense, or perhaps it would, or
going from 31 up.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe that's the solution. But what are your thoughts on what the future holds for Curio Cards?
So like Curio 2.0 is wrapped Curio, and like that's how I see it. I'm like, okay, cool. It's Curio cards and they work on stuff. We came out, we were like, okay, we're gonna have to build our own exchange, like they don't exist. And now Curio's on an exchange. Like that's amazing. Trading Curio cards back in 2017 was like peer-to-peer. People go in a Telegram room and like trade cards back and forth and hope the other person sent the money or the card. Maybe they use like an escrow, like they'd ask somebody, hey, can you hold both cards? And it was, so the wrapped Curio cards, that's a big part of the future right there. There is more we can do with the wrapper. We can improve it. People can make new versions of the wrapper. There's room to make the wrapper even more amazing. So I kind of want to focus on that, the world of tools and services and, galleries and wallets, making Curio easy to use, easy to understand, fun. In terms of creating new cards, it's the same reason why you don't see like Punks 10,001, 10,002. Like they're not making new either. It was kind of a singular released set. When we did it, we weren't planning on it being a singular released set. But when we did 30, we were kind of like, the last one's like the sun setting. It was also, there was a big eclipse happening. So it's really about the eclipse, but it also is kind of about like the project being like, okay, and I at the time did want to do 31. I had this idea to do another 30 that used more curation of the community. And I took a honest stab at it. I spent a lot of time at it. But we also kind of put 30 the way we did because we weren't sure if that was going to happen. And it didn't happen. It was way too hard because we were trying to make curios that were compatible, because at this point OpenSea existed. And we're like, okay, the new 30 will be compatible, but what do I do about the old 30? So I had to like fix the old 30 and release the new 30 at the same time, and just couldn't figure that out. Wrappers didn't exist back then as an idea.
And then for the, I guess,
so yeah, no new cards. To summarize, no new cards.
No new cards.
Just making the cards better, easier to use, fun. Anybody could make a Curio 31, but it wouldn't be like an official Curio 31.
And then a quick thing on the OpenSea sales, is there some sort of compensation model? Like, is there a royalty for the artists based on those sales that have been happening? And what percentage is that?
So when you make a wrapper and you on OpenSea, or really just make an NFT and you go on OpenSea and you list it, if you are the person who created the contract, they give you the option of adding a fee, a royalty on top of the fee that they take. So there are third-party Curio wrappers out there, and because anybody can make a wrapper, and some people did, and they added a fee that for them for their work, which that's fine, that makes sense. The official like verified blue check mark Curio wrapper, though, that was made by a lot of people working really hard. So I wasn't about to unilaterally apply a fee to that. So we debated it, in the community. We talked about it, and we actually even voted about it. We have a governance.curio.cards. You can vote with Curio Cards. So we had a whole thing we had to set up. Is you use tools from like DeFi. We use a thing called Snapshot, which is how like, big $1 billion DeFi projects vote on things. We had to like submit our own voting strategy. We did all the things. And so it's decentralized voting. And what we ended up doing was a 1% fee on all trades, 100% of that going to the artists. So there's no like community marketing fund, which was an idea people knocked around. We figured if there ever is a need for a community marketing fund, that'll have to have a different revenue source. But since we don't really know what that is yet, this is about the art. This is about, selling the art. The artist should get a cut of that. So the 1% fee goes directly to an artist-controlled multi-sig account, and then they split it between themselves.
Awesome. Travis, this has been an awesome episode. I think that it's going to be very, very valuable for anyone who is recently heard about Curio Cards, who's wondering about the history, about the details. You did a really great job with the deep dive there. But we like to end every episode of Show Me the Crypto with a 3-question segment that we call You Had Me at Crypto. Ulf's going to ask you those questions.
All right, okay. Travis.
I wish I had looked ahead of time.
Don't worry about it. All right, the first question here. Who's your favorite person to follow in the crypto space?
Andre right now. There's that meme, new Andre tweet. That every time Andre tweets anything, the guy who created Urine, somebody always puts the new Andre tweet meme up every single time. You always got to pay attention to that. Although he isn't posting as much stuff these days. Used to be, obviously just follow the big names like Vitalik. What I do on Twitter is I actually follow developers. I'll find a project I like, and then I'll find the developers of that project and I'll follow them.
Nice.
Cool.
All right. Second question. What will the price of Bitcoin be 10 years from now?
More.
That's it.
All right.
It's sort of like the, gold goes up in value over time thing.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to get real spicy and have people hate mail me, I think Ethereum will go up more. I don't think Bitcoin's going to do bad. I think it's going to go up, but I think Ethereum will do a lot better because it's assets at work. It's more utility.
We're getting into the topic of other projects. This is the third question. What is the most underrated coin or project in crypto?
Curio Cards.
Other than Curio Cards, you got to say something else.
Oh, sorry. Okay, yeah.
Not that that's not fair.
Yeah, it's a fair answer.
Another one.
Yeah.
Gosh, let me like look at my. I want to give you a really good answer. Let me look at my. Take a second. Let me pull up some things that I got going right here.
Got your digital sticky notes of underrated projects.
Well, I have like my kind of list of things that I'm interested in getting right now.
Cool.
Oh yeah. Oh, clear, easy answer. Alchemix. That's with an X. I don't know if are you familiar with Alchemix?
I have. I've definitely heard of it, but I can't even think of what it actually is right now.
I like it a lot because of how simple it is. I think being like bullish, being easy to understand is very bullish. Alchemix is the loans pay themselves. That's the whole thing. You take out a loan in Alchemix and the loan pays itself back over time. So you just wait
Please
and your loan goes
elaborate.
away. They take when you take a loan on crypto, it's a collateral backed loan because they don't know who you are. They can't like have Vinny come break your knees if you don't pay. So you have to put collateral up. So what Alchemix does, they're like, this collateral is just sitting there. Let's take the collateral, put it in Yearn, invest it, do things with it. It's all smart contracts. They don't, the custody is still there. You can withdraw it, at any time. And whatever it earns in yield pays the loan back.
Interesting. So is there an interest rate, or is it just basically takes whatever it earns through years?
It's a negative interest rate.
Interesting.
There is an interest rate. It's negative. Yeah.
That's cool.
Super
Thanks for that one.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's a really neat project. They have, it works with DAI, and they just released it with ETH as well, but it's a really small cap. I think it's already maxed out while they kind of like experiment with it. But they're going to have, you can take loans in ETH, Bitcoin, DAI. I guess it's the ethics thing, right? Like, do I disclose? Yeah, I like Alchemix. I own some Alchemix.
There we go.
It's interesting though, just on that subject, how DeFi is so like the tools that are coming out are just so crazy, and there's nothing like it in traditional finance. Like it just doesn't exist. Yeah. And I really encourage people to get into DeFi. It's crazy. That's
the main reason why I can answer so confidently, because there are like tons of really cool projects, but the ones that are really interesting are the ones that do something that you haven't seen before. Mm-hmm. Like when flash loans came out, that was amazing, because that's something that does not exist in the traditional financial world at all. And up till that moment, maybe there's some smaller examples, all we had done were take traditional financial things and make a crypto version of it. Maybe it's more efficient, maybe it's more trustless, whatever, but like there was an analog in some way. Mm-hmm. And a flash loan is like, here's a new financial primitive that does not exist. You can borrow as much money as you want, as long as you pay it back the same second you borrow it. And that's dumb. It makes no sense, but it's really powerful on Ethereum, on crypto platforms, the way they work with doing many things in one transaction.
Yeah, exactly. Travis, this has been an awesome episode. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Show Me the Crypto.
It's been an honor.
Thank you for listening to Show Me the Crypto. Please make sure to subscribe as well as rate and review this podcast.